Let's just get this Band-Aid off and be done with this, really. You all have been so kind in the cards and notes and things that elders and staff have done over the last few weeks. Just been a blessing to us, and we are grateful and thankful to be a part of your visiting today. I'm sorry. But please come back next weekend, and glad you're spending some time here at LifeBridge this weekend. There's a lot of things that happen every day in the U.S. I don't know if you know this or not, but 1.7 million people get on an airplane every day in the U.S. Over 92,000 people relocate sometime every day in the U.S. 110,000 people start a new job every day in the U.S., and 10,000 people retire every day in the U.S., except on Sundays. There's a lot of transition stuff that goes on, and some of those things are big deal marker moments, right? Where it keeps you awake at night. We're in this series, Insomnia. What's the stuff you stay awake at night about? Those movement moments where we recognize it's a big, now if it's not happening for you, no big deal, right? Minor surgery is always somebody else's surgery. And then when it's yours, it's like a big deal. And so as we're looking at this time of transition for us, we've been really trying to lean into what's next and how's God at work and trying to pay attention to all of the things. And for me, it's always been about trying to look ahead. When I first came in 1991, the Times Call, I was still on speaking terms with them back then, the Times Call did an article within the first month or so of me being here, and I had a copy of the article, and I've lost it. I was going to put up just this last piece. They said, they asked, what is it you hope you accomplish here? And at the time, the church's name was First Christian. What do you hope to accomplish? And I said, I hope we become a place of grace where everyone can connect with God. And I love the fact that you all have leaned into God's goodness and leaned into His grace. A life verse for me, and one that we've done a lot here at the church with, has been in Ephesians chapter 2. If you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to turn there. Ephesians chapter 2, familiar words, I hope, for you. For it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves, it's a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. I am grateful for God's grace in my life. And I'm grateful for how we've watched grace unfold in our community and ways that has impacted our lives as we have connected with God's grace, His tremendous love for us. And I'm grateful for the things that you all have leaned into and the things we've tried, and a lot of them we failed at, and many of them we've seen a bit of success with, and how that's impacted in our community and in other churches all around the globe who've adopted some of these same things of helping people connect. Because here's the reality. Stuff is changing. The world is changing. And with that, you and I have this basic responsibility. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you know this grace, then you have one basic responsibility: to take the gospel, the story of Jesus that never changes, to a world that is never going to be the same. There's a lot of dramatic shift going on today, isn't there? Some of the changes we're seeing are good changes, aren't they? I mean, the fact with technology we have, and our phone now being able to do a bazillion things, there's more power in our phone than what the guys who went to the moon had in their phone, on their onboard computer. All of the technology, all of the advances, the medical, there's a lot of good things going on. Some of the changes are difficult, aren't they? Things that go beyond our ability to know how to use them, or what's coming next, or how fast we're getting so much information. The world is shifting quickly. And some of those changes haven't been good. For a long time in the U.S., in fact, for a chunk of you in this room, you grew up with most of the people believing in, or at least valuing, Judeo-Christian values. In other words, biblical values. 75% of people in the U.S. Would have adopted those, but over the last decade or so, we've seen those numbers shift radically. And here's the deal. It's not that the number of committed Christians, those of you who would say, I'm a sold-out follower of Jesus, that number really hasn't changed much in the last 4 decades. About 25% of people in the U.S. would say, I'm a devout follower of Jesus. But that group that used to acknowledge that those are some good things, values we should hold on to, things we should care about, that group has shifted dramatically today. You and I live here in Boulder County, and often in a survey, Boulder County gets voted as the least religious county in America. We have people that I refer to as ABC people, anything but church, anything but church. And yet, interestingly enough, Boulder County is often voted as one of the most spiritual counties in the U.S. So there's this interest in connecting with God, but no interest in seeing it come in any kind of a biblical way or biblical value. And here's what I hope for us. I hope for us as a church that we continue to lean into the future. I'm grateful for the run we've had, and I'm grateful for the innovation and things that we've done and the way our community's been impacted. I'm so thankful for so many people who raised their hand and said, I want to be a part of reaching people who don't know grace. I want to be a part of serving disenfranchised. I want to be a part of helping at-risk kids. I want to be a part of those things because it was a way to demonstrate God's grace. Here's some numbers that are kind of alarming, actually. If you look at the age of people and the percentage who would claim to be Christians, if you're over the age of 53, 65%. You work your way down to get to young adults and children, it becomes 4%. If you're watching where that trend is going, do you see where the math is taking us? And so there is never a better time than for us to be leaning into what God could do here in this place, in our community. And I'm grateful for the ways that you have done that, the ways that you have embraced God's grace. You know, I think we ought to pay attention to intersections. And I've been saying that for a long time, that at some intersection moments, there are important things that happen. And so Diane and I are at an intersection. Our church is at an intersection. You end up in some intersection moments. And I believe it's in those moments we get a chance to see where God is engaged and what he's doing. And so I'm so thankful for the opportunity to have come here and served at LifeBridge. And I remember when that happened, I was coming out to speak, and I was actually out in the mid-'80s raising money for the college where I was working. And I shared that story, I think, last fall. I met Dale McCann, the pastor of First Christian in downtown Longmont. He was an alum of this school, and so I was wanting to get some money out of him. And so we went to dinner, said you ought to contribute to the school, and he hadn't written a check yet. And he said to me, hey, would you like to go see some property the church bought? And I didn't, but I still was needing to get a check, and so I said, sure. And we drove up out to Highway 66. I had no idea where I was, and I just remember the turn onto 66 from Main Street and the view of the mountains, and we pulled down this old dirt road, and I said to Dale, hey, how about if we get out and I want to just pray for you and pray for the church and what God's going to do in this place someday, having no idea what I was doing, what I was praying for. And then it was a couple years later, I was on my way to speak for a business conference in California. The church here had invited me to preach. You were in the high school at the time. And so after service, one of the elders came up to me and said, hey, our pastor is moving on. Would you like to become our pastor? And I chuckled, and I called Diane that night and said, hey, do you want to move out here to like this cow town in Colorado? 8 weeks later, we were at a convention in Denver, and two of the elders had asked if we could have lunch, and I'd forgot to tell Diane. I said to her that morning, hey, I forgot, I'm having lunch with these guys from that church in Longmont. And she said, why? We're not going there. And 8 weeks later, we loaded up our kids in a U-Haul and drove from Cincinnati out here. You never know how God is going to use an intersection when you're paying attention at the intersection. I remember when I first went into ministry, and Diane and I wanted to go back to upstate New York, where we're both from, and help plant churches or get involved in every door we tried, everything we tried to pull off in our own power. We couldn't make it work. It just didn't come together. And I met a guy standing in line at a convention, actually. He said, do you know a guy named Rick Rusaw? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, tell me about him. So I started telling him stuff. And he said, well, I'm in a church in Florida, and we're looking to hire him. And so we had a conversation. I didn't want to go to Florida. I'm a New York guy. And we ended up in Fort Myers, Florida in 5 years, and we loved our time there. Our two oldest were born there. We thought, just about the time we thought we're going to be here for the rest of our lives, the college I graduated from got in some financial trouble, and we went to Cincinnati to help turn that around. I went there just for 1 year, and we ended up there 5 years, and just when I thought I might be staying there, we ended up here in Longmont, Colorado, and man, what a blessing. Lately I've been praying, Lord, please don't send me to Hawaii. I don't ever want to go to Hawaii. Don't do that to me. Man, some things have changed, and we're seeing a lot of change. But some things haven't changed. What hasn't changed? Man, we need each other. All of us need other people in our lives. We need the connection. We need the encouragement. We need the support. We need the hugs. We need the love. We need the people who cry with us and laugh with us and journey with us. And what hasn't changed is people's need for a connection with God. Now, we search for it in all kinds of ways, don't we? We got this hole in our heart. We try to stuff a lot of things into that spot. We try to cram a lot of things that are going to make us feel better or successful or valued. But all of us need God's grace, His goodness, His love. I remember I grew up in upstate New York, and we didn't go to church, and my parents were really good people, but church wasn't on the list. And we moved out of the inner city of Syracuse out to a suburb, and we happened to live where there's a little church had this big yard. And man, I was down at that church all the time playing baseball. Got to meet the pastor a few times when we broke windows in the building. And I remember that was in the days when ministers would go calling, knocking door to door, and they'd get to our house, ring the doorbell, and my dad would go, shh, everybody quiet. We'd sit in the house, I thought we were playing a game. We were. But I remember the very first time going to a retreat for some high school students, hearing that there was a God who loved me, overwhelmed by that love. Because all the love you and I experience, it's got a comma in it, doesn't it? I'll love you if, I'll love you when, I'll love you because, I'll love you in spite of. And God's love has just this period. I love you. And I don't know what's going on in your life right now at this moment. I don't know what's relationship challenge, what job challenge, what personal intersection you may be in this moment. But if you don't ever get anything else in this place, I hope what you find is that God's reckless love, His love that pursues you, chases you, knocks down barriers, is an I love you period. And I'm so grateful for His grace. That grace that changed the trajectory of my life and my family's life. It changed the path of where Diane and I have landed and what we've done. And if there's been anything of all the stuff that's happened here in this place, more than anything, it's I hope that you've connected with that goodness of God, His grace, His love. And if you haven't done that yet, I want to encourage you today. If you haven't been baptized yet, I want to help you with that. I love what hasn't changed. And here's the deal. Because of those two things, the things are different today. Some things have changed. Because some things haven't changed, I'm so excited about what God is doing in this place and look forward to Matt and his leadership. And when I, last summer, came to the conclusion that it was time for me to make a transition, there was really a primary driver in that, and it was this, that I believed we needed a younger voice, a younger leader to help us lean into the future. Because I'm not interested in hoping that we replicate what we've done here and programs and things that we've done, but I hope that we continue to extend the grace of God. And I love Matt's heart around that. And here's what I know. We need a younger leader who will take us to the next thing. Says, we're not building a church for most of us sitting in this room. We're building a church so that my grandkids will come to know that grace. And we're helping to build into the future. What Matt's dreaming about and planning for and leaning into is about what God could do so that 128 years from now, if the Lord has returned, LifeBridge will still be a vibrant part of this community. Why? Because grace matters. Connection with God matters. Some things have changed and some things haven't changed, and you and I have this opportunity to lean in to what God is doing. And so I hope that you'll encourage and support and pray for Matt like you have for me. And I hope you'll love his family like you've loved our family. And I hope you'll take risk with him like you've taken risk with me. And I hope you'll embrace the change that's coming, because I'm going to be disappointed if there's not some change. Because if we're not always looking into what's next, we're going to miss the curve. Blockbuster was the largest retailer of videos on the planet. Several years ago, they filed for bankruptcy and then later closed almost all their stores. There's just one left. It's up in Alaska. What business were they in? Well, they thought they were in the video DVD business, but they were actually in the entertainment business, and they missed the turn. And now you can drive around town, go around the country, every blue awning you see, and what do you say? Well, that used to be a Blockbuster. I'm in Europe and Asia quite a bit. In Europe, on every corner, there's a church that's now a pub or an office complex or a condo. Missed the turn. And so embrace the change. Pray for the change. Lean into the change. Because we have this responsibility to take the gospel that never changes to a world that is never, ever going to look the same. And because some things have changed and some things haven't, Diane and I are leaning into a new season in our life. I'm helping a group of churches that our church has been connected with for a long time, independent Christian churches, and some of the best things happening in ministry are happening through our churches. And yet, we used to have this convention that kind of gathered us, and that's becoming old and stale, and I got asked to help kind of recreate that. We're shifting it into a leaders conference. We're rebranding this as Spire, and Spire is about helping point people towards God, particularly connecting with young leaders and young pastors. There's some stats for pastors that are terrible. 50% of church leaders drop out within 5 years. 70% have lower self-esteem than when they started ministry. 1 in 10 end up retiring in ministry. Here's the deal. It is not vocationally friendly. And there are less young men and women going into ministry today than there ever have been. And there are less people who are staying in ministry once they're in. There are others who are trying to figure out how to do bivocational stuff. And so I've had a passion for young leaders, and we're going to connect with them and gather them and speak into their lives and mentor and provide a lot of 24/7, 365-day resources. And we're going to do that off a platform that's actually being built over in Glue. And how do we use data for good? And how do we use technology for good? And so I'm going on the executive team at Glue to help connect churches to being more engaging in their community, to understand what's happening around them and bring young leaders and pastors into that. And so if you want to be praying about something, pray about what God is doing in that, because I'm excited about this next season and how God's going to give us this opportunity to lean in, because I care about what happens a decade from now and 2 decades from now and long after I'm gone. What God does to help us do one thing, and what's that? And connect with His grace. Grace changed my life, changed my family's life, changed our family's life. And I love looking around the room and seeing so many stories of you who've experienced God's grace, His goodness, His peace, and you've allowed Him to fill that empty spot in your heart. And when He does, all the other stuff that stresses us out seems to settle just a bit. And so I'm grateful to have served here, feel honored and privileged because of that. I'm grateful for the leaders who took a chance on me when I was 31 years old and had no idea what I was doing. The over-under on me was like 12 months, so sorry for those of you who've lost some money in that deal. And I'm grateful that we've been just a small part. I'm thankful for the leaders who encouraged us and blessed me as we leaned into things. Some of those things worked, many of them didn't. And I'm so grateful that we've had the chance to be a part of telling the story of grace in this community. And I'm thankful for the staff who have served and loved and given and who care, made me look better than I am. I'm thankful for my family. They're sitting over here this morning. Our kids who didn't pick this fishbowl life but lived it most of the time with grace. A few moments, David, Eric, Chelsea. Thankful for Diane, who she's the reason you've let me stay around, actually. Best part of me. I'm so thankful. When we lived in Fort Myers, our two oldest, I told you were born there, David and Eric, and they were about 2 or 3. And a salesman came to our door. We were getting ready for dinner. The boys are sitting at the table. Diane's getting the food on, and I'm talking to this sales guy in our doorway. David, who always had a deep voice, his son has the same deep voice right now at 3 years old, walked over finally, grabbed this guy's pant leg, looked up at him and said, "Time to go, bud." And so, it's time to go. Time to go. Now to him, who is able to do immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus and to the generations who come.